Hello, I'm Ross Buchanan, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to make a podcast. I'm going to do this in 5 steps. The first being subject, the second being treatment, the third being software, fourth hardware, and fifth delivery. You alright, Pickle? This is quite a weighty subject, so feel free to bookmark this video and come back to it step by step. You can also get in touch with me in the comments below or follow me on Twitter @Rossi if you have any questions. So firstly, podcasts are a great way of exploring the passions in your life, whatever that may be, from true crime to comedy, witchcraft or horse racing. You can pretty much do a podcast on anything. So let's talk about subject. The first thing I want you to ask yourself is, what makes me tick? What is my passion? What can you talk about in a way that nobody else can? What's a record that you really, really love and you always return to? What's a TV show that you've rewatched 400 times? Or maybe you've just picked up a brand new hobby and you want to share with the world just how obsessed by it you are. This is your subject. Now, it doesn't have to be unique. It doesn't have to be special. There are like 400 podcasts about the environment, but that brings us to treatment. So treatment is the way that you're going to give your podcast a unique selling point. How can you take your subject and deliver it in a way that nobody else has done before? Now, it's worth mentioning that nobody has your experience, nobody has your history around this subject or your stories to tell. So your podcast's already unique. You might also have a friend that you have great chemistry with and you want to buddy up with on this podcast. I love listening to people who have great chemistry on air, but just make sure that if it's a really close friend, that you don't tell too many in-jokes, because it can leave us feeling a little bit left out. Another point is that maybe you aren't the best person to present this podcast. Maybe you've got an idea, but actually somebody else has a better knowledge, more expertise on this subject. Maybe you're going to pitch the podcast to them and then produce it. There's no shame in being the brains behind the content. And finally, you might give your subject the treatment of a game or something that will give it that unique edge. Maybe you're doing a podcast on the TV show Grey's Anatomy and you want to give it the treatment of a quiz. So you ask someone who knows absolutely loads about Grey's Anatomy what happens in that TV show. What does happen in that TV show? So far we're asking ourselves 2 questions. The first one is, what's my passion? And the second one is, how can I make that passion or topic unique? So now you've got your podcast idea. It might be Robert De Niro talks about different types of toasters. Great, we're going to run with it. You need something to record it on. So hardware. I personally use a USB microphone known as the Yeti Blue. It's kind of become industry standard if you're recording at home over the past year or so. And it's great because it has something known as cardioid features, which is where the microphone essentially blocks out everything else going on in the background and just hones in on your voice. It costs around £100, but it's a really good way of making crystal clear audio in an environment that maybe isn't the best to record in. Also, if you want to improve the quality of your audio and you're in a particularly echoey room, get lots of soft furnishings, invest in a new rug, treat yourself. But that doesn't mean you have to fork out £100 on a brand new microphone. If you've got a really good idea, but you don't have the budget to fork out on lots of expensive stuff, then just record it on your iPhone. I'd much rather listen to an interesting topic delivered excellently with brilliant presenters recorded on an iPhone than some boring podcast recorded at Abbey Road. I don't care. It's way better that you have higher content quality over higher audio quality. Nobody's going to listen to your podcast if it sounds great, but it's super boring. And that brings us to software. Now, you're going to need something to splice up the audio. I personally use Adobe Audition. I find it really easy to use. It might look a little bit daunting the first time you open it up, but actually you can get your head around it really quickly, and there's loads of YouTube videos out there to help you do just that. It can be a little bit expensive, but what I've noticed is they don't actually check if you are a student or a lecturer, and you get a discount if you say that you are. So if you want it for cheaper, then just do that. They don't check. There are also loads of free options out there like Audacity, which aren't as high tech as Adobe Audition, but still do a pretty decent job. And if you're planning on doing this more professionally, maybe you want to go make podcasts for the BBC or something, then first of all, what are you doing watching this video? And secondly, it might be worth investing in a course about Pro Tools or something like that. So you've got your subject, you've got your treatment, you've got your hardware, and you've recorded it. Now, you want to do a little bit of editing. First of all, it's easier than it seems. All you really need to do is top and tail it, which means getting rid of the dead audio at the beginning of the podcast and at the end of the podcast. So it immediately starts where you want it to start and doesn't awkwardly linger at the end. You're also going to want to level it out. So if there's any super loud bits in the recording, bring them down to the level of everything else. I like to go between -3 and -6 decibels. I also like to add a preset. If you use Adobe Audition, you can go to compressors, multi-band compressors, and then just add the preset of broadcast. And I just think it makes the audio sound so much fatter and more professional. It's great. Another way that you can save yourself loads of editing time is thinking about word economy when you're recording the podcast. Now, word economy is essentially a fancy way of saying, how can I get my point across in as few words as possible? Jay Leno tells a story about how he writes jokes. He's a comedian. And basically he says that he writes a joke and then he performs it in front of a small audience. If they laugh, he'll then remove a little bit from the joke and try it again. If the audience still laughs, he goes, okay, great. And then he takes a little bit more out. Eventually the audience will stop laughing, and then he'll add that last bit back in again. And that, in Jay Leno's opinion, is the perfect joke, when you've got your joke across in as few words as possible. This can be used across any content. Now, finally, let's talk about delivery. I assume that you want to distribute your podcast somehow. That might just be in an email to your friends to get feedback. You might just want to upload it to SoundCloud, or maybe you want it across all major streaming platforms. So there's a few ways that you can do this, and there's a few different services that also do this for you. I personally like to use Anchor because it's free, it's easy to use, and it's just been bought by Spotify. So the data and analytics are really, really good. So you can basically see where you're charting across the world. You can also see the exact type of person who is listening to your podcast, allowing you to then tailor your content to that specific audience. I appreciate this was quite a weighty video, and feel free to ask me any questions in the comments below. If you want to see more how-to videos in the future, then hit subscribe, and if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm @Rossi. The last thing to add in is that don't make a podcast if you've never listened to a podcast before. The more podcasts that you can listen to, the better you will be at making podcasts. Some of my favorites are Louis Theroux's Grounded. I like Serial, which is a true crime podcast. I like Off Menu with Ed Gamble and James Acaster. You're Dead to Me, which is a great history podcast from the creators of Horrible Histories. There's loads out there, and there will probably be a podcast around the subject that you want to make your podcast on. So have a listen to them, see what you like, what you don't like, make notes, and then give it a go. Let me know how you get on. Good luck, and I'll see you in a bit. Oh, and before I forget, don't add any music to your podcast if you don't have the rights to use it. You can find copyright-free music on YouTube and download it on there, or you can use a service like Artlist, which you have to subscribe to, but then you get access to an entire library of copyright-free music. So just a heads up to make sure that you don't get pulled.